Maryland Bit Affinity Conference. Woo! I am so excited to see all the professionals from our Maryland community colleges. We'll have 15 of our 16 community colleges represented here today. We have a number of the Maryland four-year schools with us today. Plus, we also have a number of professionals from schools in Virginia, DC, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Texas, Iowa, California. It's really awesome. So if you want to put your institution in the chat so we can all kind of share the reach that Bit Affinity is getting across the country. I even saw registration for my own personal alma mater, Randolph-Macon College. Laura, I don't know if you're here yet, but yay, Randolph-Macon. Yeah, it's just really humbling to see how much this conference has grown in the last 6 years. I've been to all 6 conferences, and it really just wouldn't be possible without all of you, from the people who attend the conference, the people who plan the conference, and to our Bit Affinity group in general. So yes, thank you everyone who's joining us as a participant, a committee member, a panelist, or a presenter. We know that a lot of you are on call for your positions, and it can be really challenging to really step away from our email and our phone. I know I've got my email notifications popping up and everything, but we really want to encourage you to be present and mindful today. We have so much wonderful live content, plus a lot of wonderful pre-recorded content that you'll have access to for about 2 weeks after this conference today. So we really want everyone to be able to engage with each presentation. So with that being said, I'm going to turn things over to my co-chair, Pavan Perswani, to talk to you more about the Maryland Bit Affinity Group.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So as was said, my name is Pavan Perswani. I'm the other co-chair of the Maryland Bit Affinity, and I also serve as the Associate Director for Student Support at the University of Baltimore, where I'm one of the co-chairs of our CARE team. I wanted to take a minute to tell you a bit more about our organization. So the Maryland Behavioral Intervention Team Affinity Group, often referred to as Maryland Bit Affinity, was formed in 2009 to establish an avenue for the community colleges in Maryland to provide ongoing training, collaboration, and reevaluation of best practices for responding to concerning incidents that occur on campus. The Affinity Group meets on a regular basis each year to provide all community colleges in Maryland with access to expert training and shared best practices. Since 2018, the Maryland Bit Affinity has welcomed greater participation from colleagues at our four-year colleges and universities across the state of Maryland engaged in similar work. For the last several years, the group has also planned and implemented this conference, and I speak on behalf of the entire planning committee in terms of welcoming you to today's conference. That said, I also want to go over a couple of Zoom housekeeping items just to kind of make sure that we are all on the same page as we move through today's conference. So we're going to be asking everyone to follow these rules. The Zoom link you're currently on will be the link for the day for all live content, with the exception of the end of the day happy hour. Therefore, if you log off or experience any technical difficulties at any point, you can just simply log back on using that original link. We're utilizing built-in technology, which I forgot to hit until right now. So let me do this. And so in a minute, you're going to start to see auto transcription appearing on your screen. As you can see, it works pretty well. The only time you may experience issues with it is when you utilize proper names. So if I was to say my name, Pavan Perswani, it's going to do something odd and say pumpkin. It's just, that is kind of what it is. That said, any of the names or things that may be misspelled can be found correctly on our conference website. So we just want to make people aware of that. Please note that we're going to be recording some of the different live sessions to add to the conference website, and that will be available likely beginning on Monday through that 2-week period. Some of that content may be able to stay up on that website longer. However, some of it will come down after that 2-week period, just to make sure that we are honoring the wishes of our presenters. Unless you're speaking, we ask that all folks in attendance remain on mute for the duration of the live event. Throughout the day, we're going to be pinning our presenters so the video is easier to find. For those who only prefer to see one person speaking, you can access speaker view in the top right window of your Zoom window This will limit the number of windows you see down to only one person who's speaking at the moment. That said, throughout the live session, presenters may ask you to turn on your video, unmute yourself, or respond via chat. As much as possible, we encourage you to connect in the ways that you're most comfortable. Throughout the day, we'll have staff monitoring the chat to relay questions or comments to the presenters. We encourage you to be as engaged and interactive as possible with the presenters so that everyone can get the most possible out of the live session. Finally, we've designated a few built-in break periods. During those break periods, the Zoom link is going to stay active and we'll be broadcasting short videos from different local, state, and national resources that may benefit attendees. These videos are also available on the conference website to be able to view at a later time. At this point, I'm going to hand things off to Courtney Hart, the Secretary and Treasurer for the organization.
Thanks, Pavan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Courtney Hart. I'm the coordinator of College and Community Outreach Services at the Community College of Baltimore County. And as Pavan said, I serve as the Secretary Treasurer for the Maryland BIT Affinity Group. I'm also the outgoing conference chair from last year and was a member of this year's conference planning committee. I appreciate everyone joining us this morning. So I'm going to run through today's conference schedule. Thank you for putting that up there, Pavan. We based our conference schedule this year on the feedback we received from our virtual conference last year. And we're very excited to be able to hold 3 live sessions. So after our opening remarks and introductions, we're going to begin our day with a live panel session. And in this session, we're going to hear from representatives of different campus sectors about, in general, planning to return to campus safely. Then we're going to move into our featured presentation, which is SISM in Higher Education. We're going to break for lunch around 1 p.m. We're going to encourage everyone to support your local eateries in whatever capacity possible. If you need to order ahead during our 11:15 break, that's what I plan to do. After lunch, we're going to hold our BIT Affinity Awards presentation, and then finally move into our keynote address at 2 p.m. I wanted to note that all presenter biographies for the live and the pre-recorded sessions are going to be posted within your protected conference 2021 content on our website. I believe Pavan mentioned that if you need correct spellings, but also there's a little blurb about all of our presenters on the website as well. We also have 12 pre-recorded sessions, which are available under the conference content tab. And we have 10 that were recorded last year for our 2020 conference that are also available for you to view. They're going to be there available for you for at least 2 weeks. Some of the topics that were in these pre-taped presentations are Title IX and BIT, caring for students over breaks from campus, breaching silos on campus. There's a critical incident training, faculty contributions to BIT, and we also have our BIT basics training up there. We're going to wrap everything up after the keynote address, and we hope everyone joins us for social hour, which will be at 4 o'clock. That is a different Zoom link. Everything else is on the same link today. And our social hour is a way to unwind, decompress, and to network with colleagues from across the United States. And I think now we're going to, yes, we have our first winner of a book giveaway. Pavan?
Okay, give me 1 second to get back in here. Okay, so here we go. Like was said, we're going to be announcing one of our first winners that's going to receive a book provided by Brian Van Brunt and Looking Glass Consulting and Design. Winners were selected from individuals actively on the Zoom link at the time of selection and are selected via a random number generator. Our first winner is, so let me just do this real quick. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it is Allison Robertson. And so I'm going to ask that Allison Robertson please message me directly via Zoom with your address so I can provide them to Brian to help simplify the process of helping get you your prize. And at this point, I'm going to hand things back off to Stephanie. Again, congratulations, Allison Robertson.
There we go. Thank you so much, Pavan, and congratulations to Allison, our winner of our first book today. So I would now like to introduce our panel for this morning, Post-Pandemic Stress, Managing the Unseen Perils that potentially compromise our well-being. We all know that our students are struggling, but we are also, as professionals, dealing with a lot over the last year. So it's important that we make sure we are taking care of ourselves. Our panel is going to be moderated by Dr. Debra Bright. She has over 25 years of dedicated service to the field of higher education. Currently, she serves as the Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Chair of the Behavioral Intervention Team for the Rockville Campus at Montgomery College. She also serves on the President's Advisory Committee on Equity and Inclusion, where she recently completed a 2-year term as chair. Dr. Bright holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Broadcast Journalism from Syracuse University, a Master of Education degree from Harvard University, and a Doctor of Education degree in Higher Education Administration from the George Washington University. So I will now turn it over to Debra.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good morning, everyone. What a delight to be here this morning and see all of my colleagues from the state community colleges and our four-year partners. I see Morgan and Coppina in the house and other four-year institutions. It's wonderful to be here and serving as your moderator this morning. I am a proud member of the Maryland statewide Bid Affinity Group, and so it's just a delight and a pleasure to be serving on to talk about this critical topic on post-pandemic stress, managing the unseen perils that compromise our well-being. As Stephanie said, this is truly a critical and timely topic to explore as more individuals are getting vaccinated and the world, including many of our higher education institutions, are beginning to open back up for in-person engagement. And so the question really is, how will we fare as we start to navigate into our next normal? Are we physically, mentally, and emotionally ready? And this isn't just about us, of course. It's also relevant for the students that we serve, for our coworkers, and certainly even our loved ones. So let's talk about it. We have 5 higher education professionals and expert panelists here this morning who will help us do a deeper dive into this idea of post-pandemic stress. And so let's start the conversation by having each of our 5 panelists introduce themselves. And why don't you give us your name, your organization, your professional title, and if relevant, will you tell us briefly if there are any additional duties or roles that you had to take on in light of the pandemic? And we'll start with Dr. Brian Van Brunt.
Thank you all, and I really appreciate the offer to be here as part of the panel and to be connected to this group. Currently, I work for a company outside of higher ed. After my time with NBITA and ATICS, I work for Secure Community Network. Sounds like some spy agency, which isn't far from the truth. We do protective work for the Jewish Federation, liaising with Homeland Security and the FBI, doing threat assessment and mitigation in that space. I also run a company with my wife called Looking Glass Consulting and Design. She does web design and I do the consulting piece that I was doing similarly before with other companies to support higher ed and K through 12. So just excited to be here and have that opportunity to share some thoughts on the stress that we're seeing impacting the students, faculty, and staff coming back with the version of return. I also like the optimism of post-pandemic in the title. So I know that many of us are struggling with, like, when will that post-time actually be? So that'll be a good part of the discussion as well. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Karen Schultz.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate as well the opportunity to spend some time with peers of like-mindedness. I am currently the director of the Disability and Access Services Office at the University of Baltimore. I have been in this position now since 2008 and had previously been in disability support services at what was once Essex Community College before we merged into CCBC. So my time in higher ed and special services my time in higher ed and supporting students with disabilities is getting close to nearly 30 years. I currently also, with the additional duties piece, have served on several committees that are looking at the return to campus from a variety of aspects, such as foot traffic, looking at building usage, as well as technology, signage, and accessibility overall. So it's been a good piece to have the voice of the needs of everybody, not just the students that I represent, heard.
You see my these guys?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Sherazad Foreman.
Good morning. I serve as the Dean of Student Success and Engagement at Prince George's Community College. During this time of the pandemic, I've been a part of the COVID task force. I currently serve as part of the core team with the senior team at the college. It's a pleasure to be here on the panel. I also am a member of the Maryland Bid Affinity Group and enjoy the work that we do together.
Thank you and welcome. Vernell Shahid Lavron. Hope I got your last name right.
Lavroni.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. I look forward to kind of sharing the information that we're doing at CCBC. I am the Director of Public Safety here at the Community College of Baltimore County. I've been here for about 5 years, and I retired from the Baltimore City Police Department after 30 years of service there. And I've also worked with at work opportunities where we work with individuals with disabilities, who is how our main office is in New Hampshire, Brian. Okay. I just look forward to sharing the information on what we've been doing here. And again, I want to thank you for having me here. And I'm also a member of the Bid Care team for the Community College of Baltimore County.
Awesome, thank you. And last but certainly not least, my colleague from Montgomery College, Santo Scrimenti.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here for my second Bid Affinity Conference. As was just mentioned, I'm Montgomery College, and I'm the Director of Employee and Labor Relations there. And I'm a labor and employment attorney by trade. And so I've seen in a variety of settings how disability and mental health impact the workplace. And it's only going to be an even more important consideration for us all going forward. And I am very excited to participate in discussions like these and the Maryland Bid Affinity Group in particular on the forefront of these types of considerations and preparations that'll help make things better for everybody involved. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It's great to see everyone. And so now I have a series of questions for our panelists, but we'd love to hear from our audience too. So please don't hesitate to put any questions you may have in the chat. And I know Stephanie and Pavan will be looking at the chat frequently and giving me the cue if there are any questions that the audience would like to address. But I will get the conversation started by asking for just a clear explanation about post-pandemic stress. So Brian and then maybe Karen, would you define post-pandemic stress for us?
It's a challenge, right? Like right from the beginning, I think it is not a clear term. So I would argue that point, that I think we all understand it's going to be a difficult time with people coming back to school in all the varieties that they are. I think if we look inside for each of us, we've noticed major changes, some related to mental health, emotions, physicality, our day-to-day activities, working out, socializing. So I think we're all in kind of an unforeseen water. The idea here that we don't quite exactly have this definition, I think, nailed down should not prevent us from getting out in front of taking some preventative steps to manage what's coming. I think a lot of that is similar to the work we do with BITS related to the uncertainty. You know, when a student makes a threat over email, a big part of us wonder, is this just them being angry, or is this an actual threat that has actionability attached to it? So we're used to dealing with uncertainty, especially around suicide and other areas. So my long-winded beginning here is just this idea that pandemic stress is going to be a challenge. I'd say part of the definition for me is going to be a shift from the norm, that this is something that many of us have not experienced before. I'm anticipating a bit of a honeymoon period where people come back, and it's almost if you've had the lucky experience of seeing some of the restrictions left, or some of us have been vaccinated, we start to feel this ease and relief. We're very excited to get back to, I can't wait till I can see a concert, to go to a dive bar again. We're all having our list of things that we just can't wait till we can go do and engage in. I wonder if the fantasy and the expectation is always going to live up to the reality. Maybe it will, but I worry a little bit about that honeymoon phase where people come back initially really excited, and then we start to see some of the symptoms kicking in related to exhaustion, lack of energy, and frustration. I think it's also important to remember that we're not going to see a complete removal of the tensions that are already existing, that we already have problems related to retention, connection to resources. We are in a time right now where there's a lot of conflict. Maybe you've had this in your families as well, related to the vaccine. Do you get it? Do you not get it? Has it been approved? Has it not? Just the clotting issue that came out a couple of days ago with the Johnson & Johnson vaccines caused a lot of debate in my family and extended family about just differences of opinion on things, the mask tensions that we see. Today is the day New Hampshire's losing its mask restriction, which I look at and I'm like, why not just keep that a little bit longer? But they're trying to balance out some of these issues. And let's not forget the political tension that exists on many of these issues. My one other point here would be just the existing population. So when we're looking at how, for lack of a better term, the normal population for us might impact the stress and how we're going to have times coming back and adjusting to these things. On top of all of that, there's certain populations that are going to be higher risk. Those with existing mental health services, we're seeing a real bottleneck related to mental health care right now. There's a lot of good accessibility through Zoom and HIPAA compliant online platforms. But one of the challenges we're faced with around that is access and timing. Can we get people in? Are they able to get the care that they need? We're seeing a big spike in suicide and suicide risk that I think that data is going to be coming out in the next year. We all have stories and experiences where suicide's been going up. The way we track that data tends to have a year or two lag on it to look at that data compared to baseline data. So I'm guessing in this next year, we're going to see some data around suicide risk, as well as other issues related to like Asian hate crimes, this focus on different populations, those of Asian descent, being seen as causal to the virus and people taking out frustrations towards them that are very ill-placed. So that's just my quick kind of overview with it, and I'll pass over, I think, to Karen on this and see if she can help clarify anything I tripped over here.
I don't think so, but thank you for the opportunity. I think my starting point, even though I'd like to just say what Brian said, because he captured all the thoughts already, is also to think, are we post-pandemic? Because of some of the concerns that are still rising with the increase in numbers across the country, particularly in the states that are lifting some of the restrictions, and the relaxation of some of those restrictions are causing those, including myself, not to say I'm lifting my own restrictions. I will wear my mask, I am vaccinated, et cetera, but to feel a little more at ease, as if you can be a little more free in your movements. And so having that relief, that honeymoon phase, as it was referred to, is going to make a difference in how we behave. Is that going to then see other spikes? Does that mean we're going to go back to restrictions? So to me, the post-pandemic concept is also the unknown. And we hear about the folks who lived through the first pandemic, but the difference here is now we have so much more to integrate with our society. We also have social media that is playing havoc in many ways on the mindset and psyche of a lot of folks who just take verbatim for what's written down as what to do or how to respond, or they get their mind set in some way. And so it's that unknown, it's that lack of control, what's next. And it's also the concept that we're hearing from a lot of the students that we interact with. What's the new normal going to be? How much different is it? Because the old normal was fine for me. I didn't suspect anything was wrong with the old normal, but the new normal may be substantially different. That it's how do I adjust to that? And then from the perspective of just little things, someone brought up weeks ago, we were talking, we would go to birthday parties and everyone would encourage the little ones to blow out candles. And now you think about that, is that really a good practice health-wise? And that's a tiny example of what the new normal might change for what we're accustomed to doing on a daily basis, so to speak. The decisions that need to be made, who's in charge of those decisions, how trusting is there? So there's a sense of trust difference that might also play out as we move on. We've had lots of students at the University of Baltimore who question why we were still remote. I know I'm the president this year of our state chapter of our national organization for AHEAD, and some of our conversations have structured around those decisions. What's in best interest for who? And am I part of that consideration when those things come up? We're looking at also just the impact and differentiating between COVID-based support or post-COVID, but what is the need for the support? Is it something that's now keeping from COVID moving forward? So is there COVID-related symptoms someone's experiencing because they were diagnosed and experienced COVID that makes it a disability? Or is it post-COVID? So those questions and those concepts of what do we do from an accommodation perspective, or do we make it an accommodation, are all part of the unknown from the field that I come from. And that's going to make it probably a little more difficult. Our thinking skills, the thinking cap is not going to be tossed out too soon. I think we're into coming for the fall for a lot of us, the unknown of what to do next, course delivery, environment, requests, things that are going to just be part of our new way of thinking, as opposed to just flipping the switch and going back to pre-pandemic ways of living. And that switch is not going to be a quick switch like a light switch.
Thank you. Thank you for those insights. Let's dig a little deeper here and let's talk a little bit about how do I know if I'm experiencing post-pandemic stress? Are you readily able to identify symptoms of post-pandemic stress in yourself or in others? Let's either talk to, again, Brian or Karen, or even involve Dr. Foreman in this question.
Sure. If you don't mind, I'd like to begin. What I have seen in my colleagues, my team members, and even myself is additional anxiety. Anxiety that crops up at times that probably would not have occurred pre-COVID. Times where there is compulsive behavior or even obsessive behavior. And I will say that that's probably more where I can say that's me. My children says, Mom, really, does there have to be a pump of antibacterial in every room, as well as various types of soap at each sink? Okay, maybe that was a little compulsive, a little obsessive. But also I'm finding with team members and colleagues that there's this tendency to withdraw. Whereas they may have been upfront, very forthright and forthcoming with information, actions, they've tended to withdraw. And so for me, that's been a signal to try to reach out and to have some one-on-one conversations. And that's been a difficult task for some of my supervisors and managers, to be able to see these things and reach out. So that's what I'd like to share about that.
Thank you. And I can relate to everything that you just said personally. Brian or Karen, anything to add there? Symptoms of post-pandemic stress?
So I don't take all the good ones. Why don't you go first, Karen?
Okay, I'll take yours then, hopefully. I think we're seeing grief in our peers. And this is, we think about grief, we think about death, and obviously there have been, unfortunately, way more deaths than we'd like to admit as a country. But the loss of, again, it's a process of understanding what is different and grieving through that loss. I'm a hugger, so I'll put that from my personal sense. And when I can't hug my friends, if I'm sitting outside at an eatery, that hurts. I feel the physical hurt with that. I'm also very, as my peers in the room know me, pretty extroverted. I love meetings with people because that's just how I think things through. I'm very partial to that. And not having that. Zoom is great because at least I'm connected. It's not the same thing. And I think our students that we interact with are missing that. The isolation is really causing a lot of difficulties, that disconnect. And so for myself, I can speak to the loss of connection, the loss of touch, so to speak. And I think our students and our staff and faculty are expressing some of the similar problems of just the loss. And it's really going to be again, do we jump back into just hugging everybody, or do we jump back in and recognize that we have to now have parameters or boundaries in regards to what do we do and how do we adjust to those changes? And then, again, defining the new normal and working with people's own beliefs of what is right or wrong for themselves and respecting that, where beforehand, even though we were doing that, it didn't have this extra layer of concern as a part of how we interacted with others. And that's, again, allowing folks to vent and talk about this and get their feelings out so we can all at least see where we're coming from.
Thank you. Anything to add, Brian?
Oh, sure. I think grief is an excellent lens to look at this from, and the work in grief, and I don't want to jump too far to the end about kind of what do we do, but one of the points I'll make is just the idea that it needs to be individualized. I know when COVID started, people were saying, just breathe, and I was ready to like choke someone out on me. So the idea that like one thing that's going to work for you, taking a walk, looking at the flowers, having some quiet time, getting up early and having a meditation, those things are wonderful. That's not going to work for everybody. So having an idea that grief and loss are the best, treatment modalities for those issues tend to be individualized, and an awareness of listening, what helps, paying attention. So I think the idea of making sure that our interventions are really tied to the symptoms. The good news here, which you never hear about COVID, right? So I'll give you a little good news this morning, is go find your old presentations on stress, burnout, resiliency, all of these kind of concepts. I found myself early in COVID going back to something from grad school. I just put in the chat Hans Seal's work in the global adaptation syndrome, general adaptation syndrome. I have to go back and read it again. But the idea that we have this alarm reaction phase, we have a resistance and an exhaustion. And I think, while that was mostly describing kind of immediate and reactive issues, it's a really nice lens to look at this. Essentially what it says is we have this great kind of rallying, which many of you might have experienced early on. We get kind of pushing against it, like we're going to keep doing it. It's almost like running a marathon. And then we're just exhausted. And what I'd look for here in terms of the more serious symptomology, for this post-pandemic stress issue would be the shift from, I think the stress is normal, people being upset, being grumpy, verbalizing that. I think we have to address that with some civility and some care. We need to expect people to have sleep and eating problems, being on like a hair trigger, being reactive. I love the overprotective and almost obsessional kind of ideas of having the soap in every room, or that we all have those things that we do to take care of ourselves and to push away the uncertainty that's out there for us. So those are the things that I think are normative. What I think we need to look for, the red flags, if you will, the more serious symptoms, are going to be things like that burnout. So if you remember the burnout distinction between stress and burnout, stress is like, and then we go on vacation and we feel better. Burnout, we go away, and then we come back and everything's the same. So it's that loss of hope, the loss of ideals, lack of energy, just a total disconnection. So I really like, I think what Dr. Foreman said earlier was the attention to connection being really critical there, reaching out to people. The real warning sign for me is that when you get folks disconnecting so much that they're not being checked on and doing well. So I think maybe a cautionary tale of not being overreactive to stress. We're all going to be kind of a hot mess coming back after this, enduring it, right? And you add things like racial tensions, you add things on top of the police issues going on right now, the politics, the vaccine issues, all of that, plus the stress of college. We're going to see people at a heightened reactive stress level that might not be particularly useful for them. What I think we need to watch for is folks who basically are dealing with that for a period of time and then tap out, then kind of move away from functionality. So those times where you stop leaving your room, you start just really even hiding any problems. Many of us put on a mask when we're having a rough time. We have a bunch of coffee and we get ready and we're like, this is going to be great. And we're kind of convincing ourselves of that. When that fades, when that goes away, when people let that mask drop, to me, that would be a stronger warning sign, moving forward. I don't know if that kind of connected a little bit with some of the things Karen and Dr. Foreman were saying in that space too.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'd love to get Santo and Vernell in on this conversation. And so the question for you is, given this idea of post-pandemic stress, the anxiety that people may be feeling, the withdrawn nature, maybe the sanitizing and over sanitizing, the grief, the exhaustion, given those things, what are our institutions doing, or what is your institution doing to address the potential for increased manifestation of this post-pandemic stress as campuses return to fully open status?
Okay, I'll go first if you don't mind, Santos. Here at CCBC, our public safety department, we've kind of been working, unlike a lot of colleges where they didn't have any of their public safety on campus, just one or two. For us, we've been still running at full force. So initially, there was an issue with the anxiety on a part of the some of the officers. We instituted our screening process and we started hiring safety monitors. So anyone coming on campus, we'll screen them. In the beginning, prior to having it safety monitors, we had our officers doing it. And some officers, they did not feel comfortable. They didn't want to be around anyone. And it was a big problem that we had to work with them. We got them all types of PPE. They used to wear the gowns. They had the gowns, the shields, the masks, the gloves, and everything. It was like space people walking around here. But even though we're not at that level anymore, they feel a level of confidence now in coming in. And they, like Brian said, you start relaxing things, so to speak. So they don't wear the gowns anymore. Of course, we wear the mask, and we continue to sanitize our hands and things like that. With that being said, I'm saying our public safety staff are comfortable. They understand. They're a part of this norm here. What's coming on now is more CCBC staff and students coming back on campus. Now, keep in mind, we've had some throughout this pandemic coming on campus. Certain classes were still being held, like automotive, those classes that you had to, or the health profession. So they're here and they're kind of used to it. But one thing that I found is that a lot of our CCBC staff felt uncomfortable because they have been working from home and they are used to working from home. And when they had to come in to pick up something, it was really nerve-wracking for them to do that. They did not feel comfortable. So our public safety have all had training in mental health first aid. And I think that's important to help our officers recognize some of the anxiety of individuals coming on campus to try to help them out. What we're doing, like I said, we have that screening process. I think it's a visual thing for a lot of people. They want to see certain things so that they'll feel comfortable. We want them to feel safe when they come here, to let them know it's okay. It's okay. And we understand if you have some anxiety or you're not comfortable, and we're going to do what we can. The college has put into place certain things in our structure, in our infrastructure, the spacing out. You'll see the around the desk areas, the plexiglass, and just things to keep people separated, where we have certain doors you go in and other ones you go out, certain halls you go up, another hall you go down. The college has put a lot into that to help people feel safe, as long as you follow the protocols.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're going to continue to monitor that. We have a lot of things in place to continue to monitor it and to work through it. But the most important thing is to keep the lines of communication open, so that if someone doesn't feel comfortable or don't feel at ease, they can relay that to us and we can try to reassure them that we're here for them. The officers recognize certain possible post-traumatic signs, and they can communicate better with those individuals to kind of help them feel more comfortable. Because what happens is, after you start doing it for a while, then you'll start relaxing a little bit. It's that initial step of coming in when you've been home for a year And some people have not been in around crowded areas. They don't do that at all, but others have. But the idea that now I have to go back, initially, what we're doing and still doing at CCBC, but at one point everyone's coming back, is that they set it up like 1 week a department, one part of the department come back, the next week the other one, while the other one is off. So it's kind of been flexible where everyone wasn't there at the same time. And I think that was important to get people involved in just getting used to coming in here to work when you've been at home for almost a year, you know, just like, it's like baby steps.
Sure.
But, and just know that when they come here, they're going to be fine, because we're used to this. We're used to the new setup and how things, it's not new, and we just want them to feel comfortable. So like I said, the things that we have in place is the officer training. We also have, if the officers recognize anything, we have this CCBC provides emergency EAP program that we can help refer them to. And if it's a student involved incident, we have our bit and care team and our navigators that they can go to for resources to help them feel a little comfortable and be able to adjust.
Thank you so much. Santo, anything from MC?
Yeah, I really appreciate everything that Vernell just said, because we have a similar kind of perspective on this as well. The two really big things that I am preaching to anyone and everyone who will listen, and even some folks who won't, is, you know, communication and flexibility are going to be the crucial components of making this all work. And the reality is that we're all going to have to make adjustments, right? And the other interesting piece about this is, I'm sure we've all heard colleagues, the full spectrum of emotions about coming back, right? There are some people who cannot wait to get back in the office, cannot wait to get back in the classroom. And there are some folks who want nothing to do with that. And then there's everything in between. And the interesting thing is all of those reactions are right. There's no wrong reaction to this. And so being able to understand and address that full range of emotion that we're obviously going to get is what's crucial. And I have been letting everybody know that what's important is you need to be able to explain all of the actions that we're taking, right? Here is the risk that we have identified, and here is how we plan to address it. And if someone has additional concerns beyond that, be prepared to sit down with that person and discuss it in depth, right? Know what's going on, take the time to learn what's going on to address all of the individual concerns. There's almost always more than one way to get somewhere. And I struggle to think of a scenario where we can't address someone's concern. And we're going to get thrown lots of different curveballs, and there's no way we can anticipate every single thing. But I don't think we'll be in a position where we can't address someone's unique concerns. And being prepared, being comfortable with doing that is crucial. And there are several crucial communication points, like public safety, like frontline supervisors and managers, like our faculty, like our student affairs folks, that you can all appreciate that those key points of contact for other employees, for students, for the general public, preparing those folks as best we can, just as Vernell mentioned, that's going to make a world of difference going forward. And so that's what we're trying to do. One of my colleagues the other day in a mention, when we were discussing about how a potential return, some of the details, what it might look like, mentioned that there are going to be a lot of folks with some pretty rusty social skills, was what he said. Rusty social skills getting back together here. And he's right. And so being understanding of that, right? And being prepared for that is, I think, one of the most important things we can do. And then again, like I said, communicating, making sure that decision-making is clear for everybody. And they don't have to like the decision. They might think that they could make the decision better themselves. That's fine. But I want everybody to understand where this decision is coming from. They don't like it or not, different conversation, but being able to understand that, right? That is the basis. The trust, the confidence, words that Vernell just mentioned, crucial in my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, Stephanie and Pavan, I'm just doing a check-in. Any questions from the audience? If not, I'll keep going with my questions? Nothing yet?
There
Okay.
is- I say there's a question. As campuses begin to prepare to return, what tips would you offer to share with the community members who are feeling that anxiety?
I would just offer for them to keep in mind that we have employee assistance program. If they need additional resources, we have places for them to go to get the resources they need. But once they come in, I would say just give it a chance. Just give it a chance and come on in. And then when you see how it's set up, once you're in here, then you feel comfortable. It's like when you get on that, I shouldn't say roller coaster, but when you get on a roller coaster ride, the anxiety, I was like, oh. But then once you get on it, and then you get that big dip, now you're having a good time, so to speak, but just give it a shot and take that dip. And it may be hard, but you do it, but then you'll get over a certain fear that you have, or it'll help you to maneuver through. And then once you see how things are going, you see it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
I love the idea of just jump in. It's always that first time that where you really kind of struggle with the anxiety.
But I would also like to add that we need to be patient, that there may be a need to pause, and that you may need to just step away and let that person have a moment and be accepting of that.
And I would add to that, we need to give, I don't want to coin the term safe space the wrong way, but the idea of being able to listen without judgment and let them have the moment to tell them why the fear of getting on that roller coaster, so to speak, is real. And as Santos said, there's no wrong. It's each individual way of returning and how their emotions are going to play out, that we need to just respect that as much as possible and know that that respect is there, should hopefully ease some of the anxiety. And then if it doesn't, as Dr. Foreman said, and Renelle said, there's resources. And I think we need to do a better job than we currently do. And I'm making an assumption across all of our campuses to advertise the resources, but we haven't had a need to advertise these resources in such a way that we do now. Such as our student assistance program at the University of Baltimore, our employee assistance program, and other services that we know about. It's there, use it as needed. Now it's like, it's there. You may need to use it. So I think it's an emphasis to say we have stuff in place for everybody.
Yeah, and I think for us, we've been working with the marketing team to try to make sure that, there are modules that are now placed on Blackboard so the students can see them when they enter in, that the high anxiety programs that were in place pre-COVID, those allied health and nursing programs, they have access to therapy assistance online. So now we just need to make sure that, as you stated, Karen, that everyone knows, and HR is working with the EAP program to have something they can advertise. As you said, it's always been there. We've always had it available, but we need to know now that it's really there.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo that as well, if I may. At Montgomery College, we had an assistance program for benefited employees, and just a few weeks into the pandemic, we realized that's not going to cut it. We need to open that up to everybody and push that out there. So we certainly have done that. And then another thing that our human resources staff have done, they've created employee groups, just voluntary groups based around things, just for colleagues, just to help each other. So for example, working from home with kids in school during the COVID pandemic, right? So that, 30, 40 of our colleagues have met regularly and have formed and coalesced around that thing. And, they've come up with a handful of others as well. And they continue to evolve as more folks are recognizing these are useful and valuable. They're creating more of them to cast a wider net. So things like that, just being receptive to hearing and giving people that space, that opportunity. That's been rewarding for us, and even leveraging things that we wouldn't otherwise use, because now everything has to be electronic. Like we don't have the opportunity to meet face to face or to distribute information on campus like we used to. So how are we using our Twitter feed? How are we using Facebook? Are there opportunities to engage there that people might be interested in that might help? Might not for everybody, of course, but to the extent that we can understand that, not everybody wants to get 300 emails every day. Not everybody's going to read every official college memo that you post, right? Making sure the website is up to date, making sure your website makes sense. People can find the information they're looking for now more than ever. Hugely important. Those kinds of little details that you maybe not thought of at first have now, come to the fore for us, at least at Montgomery College, to help make things easier, make communication easier, make confidence in the process easier.
Thank you. Brian, did you have something to add?
It kind of ties into the other questions that are popping in as well. And if I can, I'll keep it short. All these referral issues are great. And I would agree with everything the panel just said. Let me pull back the curtain for a minute, though, and tell you what happens in therapy. And I'll let you in on a little secret. With all deference to the great graduate school programs and what it means to be a psychologist and a licensed counselor and all the work that goes into that, it's been my experience that like 90% of what makes that effective is the ability to listen and care about the other person. I spent so much time smacking away those new graduate students from trying to fix things and do stuff and reminding them to listen. So I would suggest that as well, that the listening, and rather than jumping to a fix or a solution, but listening to what's going on, it feels odd to do. And I'll just kind of own that for folks. But when you're trying to deal with the stress that community members are feeling, when individuals are experiencing coming in, simply going back to, can you tell me a little bit more about that? What has been going on for you? It's such a powerful tool when you put it into practice. And you don't have to just take this on faith. Try it. The next time a student, faculty, staff, anyone comes to you with this stress, have your resources ready. I could not agree more with that. But also try to just say, tell me a little bit more about that. Put that little person in your brain that's telling you to send all the fix-it solutions to them. Give them a chair in the corner for a minute and ask some questions. Try to understand what they're experiencing. Because what I find for myself is that immediately takes my stress level down when I'm talking about why I'm frustrated. And, as a humanist, I also have this idea that when we're given that right space, right, that right fertile ground to grow with the right sunshine and water, we actually have a self-righting ability that we don't have to fix it for them. We can help them, basically have the tools to fix it themselves if they're given the right conditions. And a lot of that starts with just listening and caring and paying attention. So forgive the touchy-feely therapist interjection here, but that's another way to look at this as well, I think.
I love that. Sometimes people just need to be heard and give some voice to some things that they're feeling. So I think that's so important. Okay. Is there a particular concern or particular fear about what lies ahead as we steadily move towards a post-COVID world? Maybe one concern or fear that you're thinking about as we move forward. And I'll start with Dr. Foreman.
Sure. I don't really have a fear. I have a concern. My concern is just that we have so many varying positions on what's real and what's not real. And then the behavior that follows. And I say that from those who believe that while you see data and you hear of cases, that there are those who still believe that there's no need for a mask and washing of hands and keeping the distance. And so my concern is just how we will deal with that once we're back on our campuses, because the officers aren't walking around all the time. Many of us will be a person to be confronted with it, and just how will we fare? How well will we do?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Schultz?
I think the concern about distinguishing, as I've said before, between pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, and the fears, the PTSD diagnoses that will probably start to flood in, whether it's self-diagnosed or professionally diagnosed, and understanding what that means in the sense of that fear could equate to post-traumatic stress of being isolated and jumping in, not having that human connection they had previously, as well as just understanding that everything everyone's going through and the return piece is going to manifest differently in everybody else. We're not going to be the same in how we display what is going on emotionally, physically for us. As I'm sure most campuses have had several faculty, students, staff lose family members. You know, that grief maybe never was fully developed for that loss. And then coming back, maybe the reality of being back into what was prior will hit them in a way that may cause behavioral concerns. How do we then differentiate, is it behavior or is this a manifestation of something otherwise? Even though the behavior in and of itself can't be excused, but the understanding of what brought that on. And so I think a lot of thinking, a lot of patience is probably going to be the top word in our vocabulary. And as we move back to this sense of, you know, understanding and supporting everyone the same basic way. It's not going to be easy. And I think just taking the time, and I think my biggest concern, honestly, is returning back to campus and having the folks who did not feel this was a necessity to be as remote as we have been, particularly in a classroom setting. And how do we allow that interaction to be how do we help that interaction to not be more than it could be from a negative perspective and impact the learning environment for everybody? And as well as give them allowance to express why, as opposed to, you know, getting into those battles between each other, or finding a place where that battle can happen in an appropriate way. Because we also want people to know that they can be heard for their difference of opinion, whether we agree or disagree. So I think we're really moving in a whole new territory, and none of us, despite our background and what we all have done for numerous years, know what to expect. I think also sharing that with our peers. Those of us in the room, none of us have experienced this before. And so saying that to someone, we had a student in the email last semester saying, I would have thought it's close to a year doing this, you all would have figured out what you were doing. And I wanted to type back, I've never lived through a pandemic. I'm sorry. But you can't. But you can have that black, dark, or gallows humor, as we call it, with your peers to say, how would you respond to this? You know, without saying, yes, we may have made errors or we may have overlooked something, but this is a whole new territory for all of us, and respecting that sense of newness, unknownness, which is really difficult for so many of us.
Thank you. Santo, Vernell, anything to add? One concern or fear about moving ahead?
Well, one concern that I have, and Karen touched on it as well as Dr. Foreman, things have been in motion for a year. So you would think that a lot of people understand what's required and what you can and cannot do. But we still have individuals, this is my concern, who will come in and say, I don't want to wear a mask, or they'll wear it to the room, but once they get in the room, they take it off. Because we currently get calls now because they'll take it off once they get in the room, and they'll wear it to get on campus. But then, then we have to address those people. But because we have to always keep in mind that we still have to, everyone has to be safe. Everyone has to feel comfortable. So when that one person decides, I don't want to do this or do that, it's about talking to them and getting them to try to understand that this is necessary. You have to do this. And my fear is when they don't want to comply, then we have to do what we have to do. And that's not going to look good to people on the outside looking in. But that's my concern. That really is.
Non-compliance. Mm-hmm. That's a concern of mine. Anything to add to that, Santo?
Yeah, and I'd say that's exactly right. And we're gonna get some of that kind of like willful stuff too, but I've already encountered a couple of situations where it was even unintentional and the people feel really bad about it, but yet you still have to address it. You still have to take action to correct it, kind of thing. When we have the self-health assessment before you can come onto campus, you got to, check the boxes and get your little green, thing before you can check in for campus for now, for the limited folks we have on campus. And we've had folks say, well, yeah, I mean, I had a sniffle, but I get allergies, or who doesn't have a sniffle in January? I didn't think anything of it. And they didn't put it on their assessment. And then they ended up testing positive, and they exposed 2 or 3 other coworkers that had to then quarantine, and they feel terrible about it, but you still gotta address it. And how can we properly prepare some mechanism to kind of catch all of that, right? And it's going to be a moving target, as most of the last 12, 13 months have been a moving target, right? So and then the folks who, well, if I'm in my own office with my door closed, why do I have to keep my mask on, right? All those kinds of situations definitely going to happen. And it's not going to be a straight line, that's for sure. And there are going to be some bumps in that road. So, I'm with you all on that one.
Let's move the conversation into strategies. Okay. 1 or 2 preemptive actions that you are considering or maybe already acting on to mitigate post-pandemic stress in your life and in the lives of others where possible. And maybe I'll start with Dr. Van Brunt on this one.
Thanks. I'm always checking that mute button to see if I was on there or not. I think this is going to echo what other folks have said, but if I was giving you, let's say like a good 3-point sermon, right? Like the first one's going to be about setting clear expectations. And that goes to some of the marketing. This is how we're doing it. We understand there's different opinions on one side or the other. This is where we've landed on this. So making sure that people know what the expectations are ahead of time. When the expectations aren't set for the students, faculty, or staff, it's like giving them a test that they haven't had a chance to study for. So I think that has to be the kind of first thing. The second thing I would say is it's more of a self-protective stage, and I feel for the conduct officers almost more than anyone else in this space. But I think we talk about this all the time, but having some protective measures related to stopping the students from getting your goat or pushing that big red button, because they are going to do it. They are very excited to get, if you've watched those videos on YouTube where they have someone who's like, you need to wear a mask, and it's like, well, I have a medical condition. And you're like, part of your brain like starts to be like, oh, what? So it's those kind of moments where I think we have to do some self-care to bring our level of reaction, at least for me, down, and then really look at that developmentally appropriate, kind of drawing into that toolkit. And that third piece for me, so we have like the setting expectations, being aware of our buttons, and then finally just having those skills, going back to the box of skills we have on crisis management and de-escalation. How do we build a bridge of connection? How do we find those moments of similarities? People tend to listen to and take advice. Here's a little psychological trick for you, from people that they feel connected to and similar towards. So if you've ever been driving in your car and someone cuts out in front of you, I know there's never any traffic in Maryland, but if you could imagine for a moment, in those scenarios, sometimes you flip the person off. We would do those kind of things in a car because there's some of the distance there and there's not a lot of connection. When we find ourselves around a person face to face, it's a little harder to have those kind of negative reactions because we're held accountable. Same with social media, just by the presence and the physicality of it. So I think just reminding ourselves about good crisis management skills, finding commonalities, not escalating the situation as you go forward, and keeping your own frustrations kind of like an own it moment. Like, I have very strong feelings about this. So when someone comes at me with uninformed advice or says something that really is a trigger for me, naming that in your head and then avoiding that immediate reaction, but rather calmly and thoughtfully with, drawing into that toolkit of interventions. So hopefully that's some good advice there moving forward in terms of those preemptive actions, kind of preparing the staff, especially, to be better at crisis de-escalation and management. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you. Anything to add, Dr. Schultz or any of the other panelists? Preemptive.
I would go back to my coursework I had taken on counseling, and one of the things that we learned is to, besides how to listen and really listen deeply, is to kind of give the person that 5 or 10 minutes to speak without interruption. And just give them their platform, so to speak. And then I constantly try and humanize myself with my students, particularly if I can tell they're in a crisis or moment, emotional, etc. And reflect back, make sure I heard what I thought I heard, I reflect back to them. So they then recognize that they have really been heard, as opposed to just kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then if I have something that kind of connects, I hear what you're saying, because this is what I experienced as well. Or I know folks who have experienced that. And then that, again, it doesn't say that I agree or disagree. It just says that what they have to say is real. And so that allows them to feel that piece there. And I think we're going to have a lot of folks who are going to be hesitant to share, but hesitant about the return, and then giving the opportunity just for that. Considering working with small groups of students in the sense of bringing them together for those conversations, but also understanding how the faculty and staff need to be the listeners and to have that ability, not necessarily to empathize overly with them, but to just give the chance to be heard and to have that chance to reflect back that they are their concerns as well. Our law school is planning on returning back full force in the fall. And one of the reasons is accreditation, but I'm sure there are a lot of students and staff as well as faculty who are concerned about that because of the social distancing. And how do you do that in a classroom that only allows so many students at a time? And all those pieces with the masks and the vaccinations, it's going to be time for us to pull on our empathy skills and our hearing skills and listening skills and just be humans to each other.
Thank you. As we approach the end of our time together, I wanted to talk a little bit about self-care practices that you find helpful. And I know Dr. Van Brunt, you touched on a couple of things, but for the rest of the panelists, are there any self-care practices that you find helpful that might be able, that where you might be able to inform our audience and how to manage this?
I'd like to share that I've traded that lunch time slot on my calendar for getting up and going for a walk. And then the meeting before that time or after that time, I'm muted so that I can eat. And so that has been extremely helpful. And the days where I have not been able to get up and go walk, those afternoon meetings saw a different side of me. I tried really hard to contain myself, but it really helped with managing the anxiety and stress of the day. So get up and take a walk.
Thank you. Renelle?
I find for me, prior to everything, I was always zip, going, doing. And with the pandemic, it forced me to chill out a little bit. Because it forced me to, I can't go here and can't go there and can't do that. And then in looking at that, it's a benefit. It's really been a benefit because I feel like I can relax. I've learned how to relax. So at the end of the day, after you've done this, after you've done everything, just take at least 1 hour to relax and just chill out. Even on the weekends when I get my great grands, when they come over, I have my grandson like, you got to take them home. I try to make that hour. So why don't we go down, you guys go down the hill now, because I have to get my 1 hour to just relax, because that's something that I've never done before, but that's what helps me.
Thank you. Relax, breathe. Santo?
Yeah, so both of those things are spot on. Find the time to get up and move, and then find the time to clearly cut things off. I have found, and from the employee perspective, and I'm sure it's true from the student perspective as well, you spend so much more time at home than you ever did before, and it's now your office, it's now your classroom, it's now your everything, right? So the lines between those different aspects of our lives have really blurred and blended in the past 12 months. And so being mindful about where to redraw that line, saying, okay, I'm done with work now. We're not going to focus on that anymore. I'm going to focus on this. Or I'm done with school now. I need to focus. Helping people do that, reminding people it's okay to do that, and they should do things like that if they're so inclined, for me is really important. And so you see people emailing at all hours of the day. Some people might do that deliberately because they want to. I suspect most people don't. Most people are doing that because they feel a need or compulsion to do so from outside of themselves. I tell my team all the time, do not respond to emails after 5 o'clock unless I say urgent, this needs your response, right? If it doesn't say that, don't respond. And I don't care whether it's from me or my boss or somebody else or whatever. If it doesn't say urgent, you cut that off, you unplug. We need fewer glowing screens in our lives, in my opinion. So I encourage folks to do that.
I love that. So hard to disconnect after 5. It really, really is. Dr. Schultz.
I can't agree more. When we first went into remote, I had my office set up in our kitchen, and I recognized that that needed to change. And as soon as I was able to move into the dining room, which is not a often used room, I could separate the family room kitchen area as my living space, not my workspace. And that has been a nice difference to have that way to walk away from it all. I've also had to really work on focusing that when I know I've got an email that I feel maybe needed to be answered over the weekend from a student, I wouldn't have done that if I was on campus. Why would I do it now? Just because I am home and I see my system in front of me every time I walk past the room. So setting up those boundaries and parameters has really helped a whole lot. And then I've also started to appreciate it more when I can, the little things. We have a bird feeder out our deck. And so going to watch the birds feed off of that and play, so to speak. I have 2 dogs that I get to enjoy every single day, despite, things that I may not have before. So finding that time to cut off the day and make it Karen's time as opposed to UB's time. And that's not easy, but I'm getting better at it.
Thank you. Dr. Van Brunt, I think you get the last word here on a self-care or a key takeaway.
Sure. I think just drinking heavily really has helped. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, kind of, right? Yeah, I like what everyone said, and I put a little thing in the chat just about flow theory. That one of the things I saw as a commonality beyond the boundary setting was just the importance of, it's odd to think about it this way, but finding a task that's small and time limited, that you have the skill set to do and that you can complete and feel good about. So if you can watch that TED Talk video, it's really a short one, about 10 minutes, Mike Csikszentmihalyi, and it's a good one. And I think it relates to a lot of what we're talking about. I really like what Santo said earlier about kind of pushing the idea to me around civility, that I think when we get back into this, the 3 things I'd look at would be listening, really leaning into our civility conversations about folks that you might not disagree, but that's okay. We might not agree on this, but that's okay. We can respect each other in those spaces. And just the power of community. I think we lean into that we're part of a community. We're doing the best we can. Let's try to get together and kind of move towards this goal. So for me, a lot of those pieces are powerful. I also liked what Karen said earlier. She kind of, people say things and it kind of gets me thinking on something else. But one of the things she hinted at was just the power of kind of leaning into some of our vulnerabilities. That I share when I can, that people learn from us better when we talk about not our greatest moments of achievement and the things that we overcame, but instead those times where we might have been a little vulnerable, made some mistakes. I think they connect to our missteps more than they connect to our greatest achievements. So just a reminder that, sharing that this is hard for us as well, not like taking over the conversation, obviously, but hinting that, we're all struggling through this and doing the best we can. So I think people appreciate them when they see those vulnerabilities from us, those little glimpses when we kind of lose it or we're not at our best A game. I think sharing that and using that therapeutically in that conversation can be powerful. So some thoughts there.
Thank you so much. Well, we wrapped up our time, and I have just been honored to serve as the moderator for this panel. I know a lot of what's been shared resonated with me personally. I love the tips that were shared, the insights. I greatly appreciate it. And so I want to thank our excellent panelists, Santo, Brian, Renelle, Shirazad, no, Sarah, sorry,
Scheherazade.
Scheherazade, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
And Karen, I should have stuck to the doctors. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I'll turn things back over to Stephanie and Pavan.
So thank you, panelists, for this discussion. It's so important to remember we're susceptible to those same trauma responses we see in our students. You know, we're only human. And that was a really good reminder for me. I actually need to book the lunch hour on my calendar for the next few weeks before someone else puts something in it, because that often happens. So my name is Allison Leventhal, and I'm from Johns Hopkins University here in Baltimore. I serve as on the board as the liaison to four-year institutions, and it's so great to see so many of you from all over the country, but also our local 4 years. That's wonderful. So shortly, we're going to be heading into our first break. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about how we're going to be using that time. So as you all know, we're really privileged to work in solidarity with many local organizations who lift our students up and provide support in ways we cannot. In order to highlight this important work, we're going to be featuring several of those organizations between sessions. And this will be done in the form of 3 to 5 minute resource spotlights, where a member of the organization will share a little bit about what they do and how they might support your students or collaborate with your campus. I know that I oftentimes at conferences like write people's names down and mean to contact them and never do. So we're going to help you with that. So should you wish to connect with any of these organizations after today's conference, please fill out the form that I will now share in the chat, and we can help connect you to the organization so that you don't have to remember to. So enjoy the break, and we'll be back at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time.
Hi, and thank you for having us. Healthcare Access Maryland is an organization dedicated to assisting Marylanders enroll in health insurance. Maryland Health Connection is our state's official health insurance marketplace. It is where you can apply for either Medicaid or private health plan coverage. MarylandHealthConnection.gov offers quality health and dental insurance that fits your needs and budget. It is the only place you can get financial help with coverage. Here are some health insurance options offered by the Maryland Health Connection. Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program provide free or low-cost health coverage. This includes some low-income people, families, and children, pregnant women, and people with disabilities. You can enroll into Medicaid year-round if you qualify. Private health plans are insurance plans that are certified by the Maryland Health Connection. Our plans provides essential health benefits, follows established limits on cost sharing like deductibles, co-payments, and out-of-pocket maximum amounts. All health plans meet the Affordable Care Act requirements for having health coverage known as minimum essential coverage. These plans require a monthly premium payment. Special enrollment period is a time outside of the yearly open enrollment period you can sign up for health insurance. If you qualify for a special enrollment period and have certain life events, including losing a job, losing coverage, moving, getting married, having a baby, or getting pregnant, or adopting a child. Depending on the special enrollment period type, you may have 60 days before or 60 days following the event to enroll in the plan. If you miss your special enrollment period window, you may have to wait until the next open enrollment period to apply. You can enroll in Medicaid or the Children's Health Insurance Program at any time of the year if you are eligible, whether you qualify for a special enrollment period or not. In Maryland, a coronavirus special enrollment period has been established. Uninsured Marylanders can enroll in health insurance coverage through the coronavirus special enrollment period. When enrolling, people should select or request coronavirus emergency special enrollment period at the end of the application. The Maryland Easy Enrollment Health Insurance Program allows Marylanders to check a box on their state tax return to request health insurance. Forms 502 and 502B will ask if you want to share your information with the Maryland Health Connection. Maryland Health Connection will follow up with you to help you enroll. Support and answer your questions. Online, navigators are available online to walk through the enrollment process on a computer. Call HCAM today at 410-500-4710 to schedule an appointment to enroll with a navigator. Health insurance is important. No one plans to get sick or hurt, but most people need medical care at some point. Health insurance covers the cost and may offer many important benefits. Get the coverage you deserve. If you're ready to apply, give HCAM a call at 410-500-4710.
Hello, and thank you so much for having us. I'm from Project Place. Place stands for People Lacking Ample Shelter and Employment. We're a homeless service nonprofit in Baltimore City that provides temporary and permanent housing as well as supportive services to homeless individuals and their family in the area. Our mission is to address homelessness by providing that temporary and permanent housing supportive services to homeless adults and families. We serve the most vulnerable and underserved of the population. This includes mental illness, HIV/AIDS, addiction, developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, veterans, families, ex-offenders, etc. We believe that those with the most need deserve the most help, and we restore, treat, and rehabilitate the entire person, empowering each individual to function at the highest level possible. Our vision is to ultimately end homelessness and help as many people as we can along the way. And we do that through a variety of different programs. So we actually have a temporary housing program and then 4 different permanent housing programs. Our temporary housing program is comprised of 2 temporary housing facilities, one on 1814 Maryland Avenue and one at 3601 Old Frederick Road. And at any given time, the 2 facilities can house up intake coordinator Anthony at agreen@projectplace.org. You can also visit our open intake hours at 1814 Maryland Avenue, which is Monday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Or you can also reach Anthony at 410-837-1400 extension 221. In addition to providing temporary housing, we also provide intensive case management and linkages to supportive services. Our temporary housing program is a little different than traditional temporary housing programs in that there isn't a limit to how long our clients or residents can stay with us. Our ultimate goal is for them to achieve permanent housing. So however long their situation takes them to work with our case managers to find that housing, that's how long they can stay with us. In addition to the supportive services we do link them to, we also have an on-site nurse, mental health therapist, as well as support groups and other activities and educational opportunities for our clients to participate in. The first and largest of our permanent housing programs is supportive services for veteran families. And I like to mention them first also because they're a little different in the way the program's laid out. So rather than being a permanent rental subsidy program, it's more of a transitional permanent housing program in that it provides eviction prevention and rapid rehousing with case management for up to 6 months. So we can provide financial assistance, whether that is to pay backlogged rent, pay utilities, help get your car fixed, whatever that may be. Obviously, that is available to veterans as well as their families, and the only eligibility requirements is that they have to make under the income cap for the number of individuals in their household, and they have to have anything aside from a dishonorable discharge. To apply for this service, they can call our intake coordinator at 410-837-1400 extension 148. That's Chanel. Or they can also email dringo@projectplace.org or hdaniel@projectplace.org to get some more information and start filling out that intake packet. Our next largest permanent housing program is a rental subsidy. It's scattered site just like SSVF and our other permanent housing programs, as it's basically a rental subsidy for any unit within Baltimore City. And this is for individuals with disabilities and their family. This program, as well as the next program we're going to talk about, require that individuals interested in the program visit a Baltimore City navigator to complete the coordinated access application. To find out more about that, you can visit www.projectplace.org/need housing or go to Baltimore City's website on coordinated access, and they have an interactive map with all the different navigators across the city. Celebration Housing is our other scattered site housing rental subsidy program, but this one is for chronically homeless veterans and their family. Chronically homeless is defined as veterans that are homeless for longer than a year, and they are required that they provide some sort of documentation to prove that, whether that be documents from services they received when they were homeless or anything like that. Like our previous program, they also must see a Baltimore City Navigator to complete that coordinated access application. We also have a new program that is not on here. It's CARES Rapid Rehousing. It was a program that is temporary in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you email us at info@projectplace.org, we can send over those intake processes as those are just now starting up. So if you have any questions or if you need assistance, please feel free to either reach out to myself, Jordan Villalobos, or Anthony Green. He is our temporary housing intake coordinator, so he can help with referrals into our temporary housing program. Thank you so much for having us again, and feel free to reach out and have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.